Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jacqueline and today we are talking about an unsolved case. You may have heard about this case on the Netflix Unsolved Mysteries series, which is also where I heard about this case for the first time, and it was so mysterious that I had to delve deeper into the story. Once I started reading about it, I couldn't stop. It's one of those really sticky cases, the ones that you really can't stop thinking about. I think one of the most fascinating parts of this case for me are all of the theories that people have about kind of what's going on in this case. And now I don't want to get too deep into it. We are going to talk about all the theories at the end of the video, but anyway, enough chit chat. This is a bit of a longer case, so let's get right into it. On June 3rd, 1995, in Oslo, Norway, a 25-year-old part-time hotel security guard named Espen Næss for the very ritzy and very elite Radisson Blue Plaza Hotel was directed to check on a woman residing in room 2805 at 7:50 p.m. This woman was not responding to hotel staff's attempts to contact her. Upon checking into the hotel 3 days earlier, on Wednesday, May 31st, the woman had not given any kind of upfront payment or credit card, despite being given a room key to access her room. After realizing this, the hotel had made several attempts to reach the woman through the TV messaging system during the following 3 days, asking her to come back to reception to resolve the issue. But the woman never showed up. So Espen was sent to confront her and to get more information. But as Espen knocked on the door, he immediately heard the loud, unmistakable crack of a gunshot from within the room, followed by an eerie silence. Fearing for his own safety, Espen ran down the 28th floor hall and hid behind a partition, waiting for any movement. As gun violence was incredibly rare in Norway at the time, Espen was unsure how serious the situation was and questioned if he really did hear the sound of a gunshot. He eventually decided that he should report the situation to his senior security officer, so he made his way back down to the main floor security office, still quite shaken. By the time the senior security officer made his way back to room 2805, it had been 14 minutes, and during this time the room had been totally unsupervised. So whether anyone left the room during this time still remains a mystery. Upon knocking on the door again, there was still no answer. The senior security guard opened the door with his master key card and entered the room. He noted that the door had been double locked from the inside, meaning that no one, other than security, would have been able to enter the room without the master key card. When he stepped further inside, he noticed a, quote, acrid smell in the air, and he called out to see if anyone was there. Shockingly, he saw a woman lying completely still on the bed face up. Her feet were dangling over the edge of the bed, with her shoes barely touching the floor beneath her. The security guard backed out of the room, figuring he may have been involved in a crime scene, and left before disturbing anything else in the room. He called the police right away using the phone in the hall corridor just past 8 o'clock p.m. 1 hour later, police arrived at the hotel. Amongst them was Officer Tom Olsen and forensic technician Bjorn Devan. The woman was found dead, staring up at the ceiling with a bullet hole in the middle of her forehead and lying in a pool of blood. There was blood spatter all over the wall behind her. She was dressed all in black, black pumps, black stockings, black pajamas, silk shorts, a black lacy bra, and a long black cotton jacket that went as low as her thighs. She was not wearing any underwear. Officer Tom Olsen would state to the Norwegian magazine Verdens Gang that, quote, there was nothing to suggest a struggle in the room. The furniture was in place, the bottles and glasses were upright, nothing was broken, and the body was closed in a natural way. Oddly enough, the room was also found to be relatively empty, especially given the fact that by this time the woman had been staying in the room for 3 days. Only a handful of clothing articles were found, including a black silk pajama top, some white blouses, a German brand René Lazard gray jacket, 3 lacy bras, a gray sweater, and a black leather jacket she had been seen wearing upon her arrival to the hotel. There were no undergarments found anywhere else in the room, and there were no toiletries in the washroom, so no toothbrush, face wash, comb, etc. There was evidence, however, that the shower had just recently been used, and a wet towel was lying on the bath mat on the floor. Only some bottles of complimentary soap and shampoo had been used, but again, no personal hygiene items belonging to the woman were ever found, although reports stated that she had good teeth and was nicely groomed. There were no credit cards found, passports, wallets, home or car keys, and no items to identify the woman on the bed. Police found a blue Travelite bag and one black Braunbuffel German briefcase that held 34 rounds of loose ammunition in one of the pockets. Police noted that these bags were too small to hold all of the clothing that the woman had in the room. This included clothing that she owned and was seen wearing by the staff during her stay, some of which were now missing from the scene. So what happened to her underwear, extra clothes, and extra luggage? Now, to add to the mystery even more, all of the tags from her clothes found in the room had been removed with the exception of the name brand René Lazare jacket, the black Braunbuffel briefcase, and the Travelite bag. It was clear that this woman was going to great lengths to keep her identity hidden. But why? The room had a breeze coming in from a slightly open window. The TV had been left on, and the room service she had ordered, bratwurst, was sitting half-eaten on the desk. Beside it was a mostly empty bottle of men's cologne. There were 3 drink bottles also empty on the desk, a Coca-Cola Light, and an Asina Orange. And these were the glass bottles that you don't see very much nowadays, the old-fashioned ones. No alcohol had been taken from the minibar. And along with these, there was an open bag of potato chips and a copy of USA Today magazine. Most oddly, the address listed on the bag the magazine came in was room 2816, not 2805. So how did she end up with the other room's magazine? The hotel did not keep guest records from 1995, unfortunately, so the name and identity of who was staying there at this time will remain a mystery. There was only one piece of identifying information that the police and investigators would be able to go off of for the time being. The registration card used when the woman checked into the hotel on the evening of Wednesday, May 31st, listing her name as Jennifer Fergate, but I will touch on this in a little more detail later on. For police, the mystery in room 2805 was just starting, getting deeper as the investigation got more involved. What would start out as being an open and shut case of suicide would reveal itself to potentially be more sinister, leading investigators to alternate between suicide and homicide as the manner of death. But before going any further, I'm going to take a step back and go into some detail about the hotel itself. I believe that it's important to understand why Jennifer Fergate chose to stay at this hotel, and understanding its history helps sort of shed some light on that matter. The Radisson Blue Plaza Hotel, formerly the Radisson SAS Plaza Hotel, was completed in 1989 on Sonja Hennes Plass 3 in downtown Oslo, Norway. Opening in March 1990 by King Olav of Norway, it possesses 678 rooms across 37 floors with a total of 1,500 beds. It is still to this day the tallest building in Oslo, previously being the tallest building in Scandinavia for its first 21 years from construction. This 5-star hotel has had its share of wealthy and famous patrons, including Bill Clinton, the Rolling Stones, and actor Michael Douglas. Amenities include a swimming pool, a gym, a selection of restaurants and bars, and meeting and event rooms. Since 1995, it has been remodeled twice, once in 2012 and once again in 2017. The hotel saw its share of tourists and was a popular hotspot for guests also attending events at the Spectrum, Oslo's leading multi-purpose indoor arena. In fact, in 1992, a footbridge was built going directly from the hotel to the Spectrum for quick and efficient access. The Spectrum hosted many famous artists such as Frank Sinatra, Britney Spears, and the Spice Girls, and held big events like the Nobel Peace Prize concert and the 1996 Eurovision Song Contest. The Plaza Hotel is surrounded by landmark attractions like the Oslo Opera House, the Oslo City Mall, and the Oslo Harbor, all within a 10-minute walk. The hotel is situated in the center of downtown Oslo, and during the time of the woman's death, the city was expanding, so many of these buildings and attractions would be new, exciting, and lavish. As the hotel catered to the wealthy and prominent, a stay there would run you a pretty penny. At the time of the incident in 1995, room 2805 was listed for 1,845 Norwegian kroner per day, or $330 in today's currency. And for a 4-day stay, the total cost would be 7,896 kroner, or approximately $1,320, before any services or extra charges were even added. Now let's talk about the investigation into Jennifer Fergate's death. There were many mysteries surrounding the state in which Jennifer's body was found. Jennifer was 5'3" with light blue eyes, a short dark bob haircut, and weighed 145 pounds at the time of her death. Due to the way that Jennifer had been found, it was assumed that Jennifer had sat down at the foot of the bed, placed the gun to her forehead, and fired one round, killing her instantly. The gun was found in her right hand and had been used with a reverse grip, with the barrel of the gun facing her head and using her thumb to pull the trigger rather than her index finger. Her hand was still gripping the gun so tightly that her thumb was slightly pressing down on the trigger when she was found. The gun used was a Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol, a gun that was heavily popularized by the military, although this gun may not have actually been the authentic Browning pistol, but a Hungarian copy from the 60s and 70s comprised of different parts. The bed was soaked in blood, and there was blood spatter on the wall and even the ceiling. After searching further, police noticed what appeared to be a burn or scorch mark on one of the pillows. It was in fact another gunshot. It was believed that Jennifer had fired a test shot sometime before the fatal blow to her head. A bullet was found to have gone clean through the bed frame and was wedged into the concrete flooring underneath. 2 empty shell casings were found close to the bed on the floor. Again, police believed this to be an open and shut case of suicide. A woman, perhaps suffering from depression, wanted to end her life alone in peace on her own time, sparing no expense in her final days. Due to the degree of certainty police had believing this was a suicide, many pieces of evidence that may have been substantial were overlooked and discarded. For example, the bedding that Jennifer had slept in, as well as the actual mattress she used, were thrown out by the hotel around 5 a.m. the following morning, after police had conducted their investigation. Because of this, no DNA testing was ever done on these items to see if anyone other than Jennifer had been with her during the previous days. As a side note, in Scandinavian countries during this time in 1995, it was customary for couples to actually have separate duvets, and Jennifer's room had a second duvet for this very reason. But in previous statements, the cleaning staff had mentioned that on the morning of Thursday, June 1st, when they cleaned the room, the main bedding had been used, but the second guest duvet looked to be untouched. Upon investigating the crime scene, however, both the main bedding and the second guest duvet cover looked to have been used. Also, and this to me is one of the biggest mysteries and oversights in this case, is that none of the hotel security footage was ever checked. How is this possible? This was a 5-star hotel. Although it was determined at first to be a suicide, over time, as more information surfaced, the possibility that it was actually a homicide became a real possibility. Police found it odd that although there was blood spatter all over the bed and room, there was no blood or gun residue at all on either of Jennifer's hands. How was this possible if she pulled the trigger? Also, the gun was determined to be obtained illegally. This is because the serial number had been removed using acid, which takes a thorough understanding of the process, as you must remove enough surface material so that zero trace can be found. Usually, inexperienced individuals that try to remove the serial numbers from guns never go down far enough, and the gun can still be identified. but Jennifer knew exactly how far she needed to go. The room was swept for fingerprints, and Jennifer's matched those found on the glass bottles, a drinking glass, the men's cologne bottle, and the open bag of potato chips. No fingerprints were able to be retrieved from the gun, but it was stated that, due to the uneven surface of the gun grip, finding usable prints was very difficult, and this was not uncommon. A fingerprint not belonging to Jennifer was found on the bag that the USA Today magazine was found in. So was this possibly from one of the residents from room 2816? When Jennifer's prints were run through Interpol, no matches were found, and the identity of Jennifer remained a mystery. Now let's go back in time a little bit and talk about Jennifer's arrival to the Plaza Hotel. Before checking in on Wednesday, May 31st, Jennifer had actually called ahead of time on May 22nd to make a single occupancy reservation. It is not clear if this reservation was for a different duration and time as the May 31st occupancy. The staff member who took the phone call stated that this conversation took place in English. It is also assumed that this staff member may have misheard the surname given by Jennifer as Fergate and not Fergate, which is why the Fergate spelling was on the registration card at the time of Jennifer's check-in on May 31st. The company Jennifer had claimed to work for was named Service, but again, it could not be determined if this was also a mistake or not. Later, on Wednesday, May 31st, Jennifer called the hotel again, speaking with the same staff member, indicating that she would actually be arriving later that same evening. During this call, a man by the name of Louis Fergate was added to the reservation. This call was made in German at Jennifer's request, and the staff member noted that Jennifer sounded to be a native German speaker, unlike her noticeable accent when she spoke in English the first time. The evening that Jennifer shows up to the hotel leaves some questions to be answered as well. Due to national strikes in both public and private sectors of Norway during this time, the Fornebu airport had very limited security, and it was not noted if she arrived in Norway by air. The hotel was also affected due to the same strikes. The time of night that Jennifer checked in, 10:40 p.m., was a very busy time for the hotel on average, as 3 major airlines, KLM, SAS, and British Airways, landed their final flights for the night, and airline staff would pile into the hotel simultaneously looking to check in. So it would be easy to go unnoticed during this time. Was this planned or a coincidence? The receptionist that checked Jennifer in that night, Sasha Renee Anundsen, recalled to Norwegian newspaper VG, quote, "I remember there was a long queue of guests. It was all about assigning rooms as quickly as possible. In fact, due to keycard monitoring systems, it was determined that it only took Jennifer 4 minutes from the time she approached the front desk to the time she entered her room on the 28th floor, from 10:40 p.m. to 10:44 p.m. How is this even possible? How is this possible if she had to get checked in, receive her key cards, fill out the registration form, carry her luggage, wait for the elevator, and then find her room? Sasha also remembered her checking in alone, but he could not be fully certain of this. The registration card that Jennifer filled out is one of the biggest pieces to this puzzle as well. When filling in the card, she states that she will pay in cash at the end of her stay. She lists her address as 148 Rue de l'Estade, 7968 Verlaine, Belgium, and corrects her name as Jennifer Fergate, not Fergate, as the previous staff had put in the system. Interestingly, if Jennifer Fergate was a false name anyway, why go to the extra effort to correct the mistake? She lists Louis Fergate as her second occupant, who was assumed to be her husband, her age as 21, her nationality as Belgian, and her employer was listed as Service. All of these claims would eventually be found to be false. Service did not exist. There was no street by that name. The postal code for Verlaine was incorrect, and she even used a mix of languages in the fake name of the street addresses. The same receptionist, Sasha, the one who checked Jennifer in initially, also saw her later that evening waiting by the lobby elevators alone, almost as if she was waiting for someone. The receptionist manager, Evie Tudum Durson, also backed this statement up, saying that Jennifer had gone to the front desk to exchange some currency, but that she was actually in the company of a dark-haired man in his mid to late 30s. Evie said that she remembered this because she believes it was the man who had handed over the cash and that it may have been US currency, but she could not remember for certain. The key card records for Jennifer's room showed that someone re-entered her room just past midnight on Thursday, June 1st at 12:21 a.m. And this would align with Sasha and Evie's statements of having just seen her in the lobby for the currency exchange. Also, I should mention that the keycard monitoring system only has information for entering into rooms, not leaving them. So all of the records involving Jennifer's room key are only for someone coming back into the room. Around 8:34 a.m. that same Thursday, someone enters room 2805 again. Cleaning staff tidy the room at 12:50 p.m. the same day and note that the room is empty. This is also when the staff observed that the main bedding had been used, but the second guest duvet had not. Also during this time, the senior cleaning lady named Vigdis Vallo saw a remarkable pair of heeled shoes underneath the luggage rack assumed to have belonged to Jennifer. Vigdis was so drawn to them, she picked them up to check the name brand so that she could buy herself a pair, as she had not seen a style of shoe like this before. These interesting shoes were also not found in the room with the rest of Jennifer's belongings the day of the investigation. So where did they go? At 2:19 p.m. that same Thursday, a staff member from the front desk realizes that Jennifer had not left any upfront payment method or credit card. So they send a direct message through the room's television set, where the guest must then acknowledge this message by pressing OK on the TV remote, essentially marking it as a read message. Jennifer will eventually read the message sent to her at 8:55 a.m. the following Friday morning. The message read, quote, "Please contact the cashier." Jennifer does approach the front desk early that Friday morning. However, it is not for the reason of the missing payment message from the front desk. Instead, she actually extends her stay for another 2 days, and is even issued 2 new key cards. How has she gotten away with this twice? What is going on with this hotel that this woman has been able to fly under the radar twice without giving any kind of personal identification or credit card? Jennifer returns to her room and greets the cleaning lady for that day, named Karen Lovebrot, in English saying "Good morning" as she passes by her in the hall. With her new key card, she enters into her room at 8:50 a.m., putting the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. So from the time that Vigdis had cleaned the room Thursday at 12:50 p.m., stating that the room was empty, until Jennifer entered into her room Friday at 8:50 a.m., the room had been unoccupied, meaning that Jennifer must have either wandered the streets of Oslo all night or stayed somewhere else for the evening of the 1st to the 2nd. Did she know someone in town? Did she take a short trip outside of town? This unaccounted for time lapse is still a mystery to police. At 11:03 a.m. that same day, Friday, June the 2nd, the key card tracks that someone entered into room 2805 again. At 8:06 p.m., Jennifer places an order for room service. Room service attendant Kristen Anderson wheels the cart into room 2805 and neatly arranges the bratwurst and potato salad on the desk. This gives her the opportunity to really observe the room and Jennifer herself. Kristen states that Jennifer was wearing, quote, "a suit or the like, with a skirt down to her knees in dark blue or black." A wheeled suitcase was also observed by Anderson in the corner of the room. This stuck out to her because, although very popular in today's world, these kinds of suitcases were not as common back in 1995. In fact, the suitcase and the outfit Jennifer was wearing left Kristen with the impression that Jennifer was an airline stewardess. Jennifer left Kristen a 50 kroner tip, which was about 5 times more than the average tip at the time. For someone who is going to great lengths to hide her identity, why would she tip such a large amount, making it almost certain that she would be remembered? At the time of the investigation, most of the meal was left unfinished, with only a very small amount of it actually having been eaten. One thing to note is that 50 milliliters of undigested food was found in Jennifer's body at the time of her autopsy, including the sausage. This is important because it shows that although she ordered the meal on the Friday, she didn't eat it until the following evening. According to the forensic doctor who performed the autopsy, she probably ate the food within 2 hours before her death. A big question that everyone asks is, what is Jennifer's connection to Belgium? The nationality on the registration form that Jennifer filled out was listed as Belgium, although she oddly abbreviated it as BC. Could this have been a typo? The company she claimed to work for was a Belgian company, and her address was listed as a Belgian address. Journalist Lars Christian Wagner, who was featured on the Netflix documentary series Unsolved Mysteries covering this case, actually went to the city of Verlaine in Belgium to try and find any trace of Jennifer or see if anyone could recognize her. In 1995, this was a town of approximately 3,000 people, so the chances that someone might have recognized her was not outlandish. But no one knew anything. During her stay at the hotel, Jennifer attempted 2 calls to Belgium numbers, although it has not been disclosed as to when, and neither of those numbers were able to connect. One number was 32-413-54817, and the other was 32-413-54017. As you can see, the numbers were very similar, with only 1 digit difference between the two, the third last digit in each number. The first attempt being an 8 and the second being a 0. When calls do not connect, the guest is not charged for them, which is why no record of them on any hotel bill was ever made. 1995 was not like it is today, where you have all of your numbers on your cell phone. Back then, you had to have the number written down in an address book, or use the yellow pages, or have the number memorized. Did Jennifer have this number partially memorized and give up after 2 attempts? Who was she trying to call? Or was this another red herring? During the investigation, Belgium telecoms company Belgacom would track down the numbers that were closest to the ones Jennifer had attempted to call and discover 7 potential numbers she may have been trying. All of the 7 numbers were shown to be within a 17-kilometer radius of Verlaine, Belgium. Again, however, if Jennifer was going to such great lengths to keep her identity a secret, why would she call these numbers, further leading police to Belgium, where she could be tracked down? It is theorized that Jennifer was actually of German heritage due to many clues left behind in this case. The phone call Jennifer made on the 31st of May, where she apparently requested and spoke fluent German to the hotel staff. The items left behind in her hotel room that had labels on them were German brands: Brombuffel, René Lazare, Travelite. She was also found to be wearing a simple gold band on her right middle finger at the time of her death, with the numbers 333000 engraved on the inside. The number 333 actually refers to the gold's purity. Gold is most commonly appraised in carats, with pure gold being 24 carats, but Germany is one of the few countries that lists gold's purity to the 1,000th part. In this case, 333 equals 33.3% gold, or 8 carats. Gold appraiser George Frederick Game explained to VG newspaper that, quote, "A ring of 8-carat gold is not very common. I find it hard to imagine that this ring could have been made anywhere but Germany, and it was probably sold there as well." Now let's talk about some of the witnesses that were also around at the time of Jennifer's stay. A number of the other hotel patrons staying with the Plaza during that time recounted seeing Jennifer. One guest named Borghild Strandenis, who had stayed down the hall from Jennifer in room 2818, got in touch with police to leave a report after seeing a newspaper article about what happened to Jennifer. She had stated that the hotel was a mess during the time of her check-in, and it shocked her how sloppy things were. She stated that she never even had to fill out a registration card, and seeing as she spent many years working in the hotel industry, she never forgot this. She also mentioned that she remembered a foreign couple standing in the receptionist area, but this was never elaborated on. Borghild also stated she remembered hearing loud thumping noises resembling a quarrel coming from one of the rooms on the 28th floor Friday evening. She said it did not sound like loud partying or a couple's screaming match, just a heated argument. The way the floor plan was, however, shows that Borghild's room was pretty far down the hall from Jennifer's, and the noises she heard were likely from either of the rooms directly beside hers, so room 2820, and interestingly enough, 2816, the same room that the USA Today magazine in Jennifer's room was from. In fact, it was not the police who went to great lengths to follow up on leads pertaining to other guests who may have stayed on the 28th floor during this time, but the journalists at Verdun's gang. At least 6 guests in total were shown to have stayed on the 28th floor during Jennifer's stay. The police could have followed up with these guests, as well as any others from that night, up until 2010, when at this time the hotel would destroy any guest records from 1995. But they did not. The 6 guests and the rooms that we do know about were 2818, Borghild Strandenes, 2807, Werner and Ruth Zobrist, 2806, Ryder Hogstad and his wife at the time. 2805 was Jennifer's room. 2804 is Mr. F, which is also an alias. 2801, Tor Oyvind Nilsborg and his wife at the time. 2816, which is the magazine room, and the occupants are unknown. All of the rooms aside from 2804 were dead leads, as they were honeymooning couples or just on holiday and saw or heard nothing from the night of the investigation. But the occupant of 2804, a French-speaking Belgian businessman going by the alias Mr. F, as he has strongly insisted that his real identity be kept a secret, did have some interesting information to give the VG journalists. He stated that he was informed of Jennifer's death at the time of his checkout, and his checkout was the morning of Saturday, June 3rd. When questioned by VG as to how this was even possible, because the body would not be discovered until later that evening, he replied, quote, "I don't know anything about that. I just remember they asked me. That's all I know." Why would they ask him anything at all at this time? How could he have known about the death before the body was discovered? Now, he is not a suspect in this case and has not been questioned further. So before we get into the theories about this case, I'd like to go over the timeline again because this case can be a little tricky to follow. So starting on Monday, May 22nd, this is the first call that Jennifer makes to the hotel to book a room. She speaks in English, and it is unclear as to these initial dates and times of her stay. Wednesday, May 31st, Jennifer calls the hotel that afternoon and informs them she will be checking in later that evening. This phone call is with the same receptionist as the 22nd call, and this call is in German. Jennifer also adds Lewis's name to the booking. At 10:40 p.m., Jennifer checks into the Plaza Hotel. At 10:44 p.m., Jennifer enters her room 2805. Later this evening, Jennifer is allegedly seen exchanging money at the front desk. Thursday, June 1st, 12:21 a.m., someone enters room 2805. 8:34 a.m., someone enters the room again. 12:50 p.m., Vigdis Vallot cleans the room and states that the room was empty. The bed appeared to have been slept in. 2:19 p.m., the front desk sends the first TV message to room 2805 requesting payment. Friday, June 2nd. Jennifer extends her stay for 2 more nights until Sunday, June 4th, and is given 2 new key cards early Friday morning. 8:50 a.m., Jennifer says good morning to cleaning lady Karen Lovebrot, enters her room, and puts the Do Not Disturb sign on the door. 8:55 a.m., the TV message requesting payment is acknowledged via remote. 11:03 a.m., the new key card is used to re-enter room 2805. 8:06 p.m., Jennifer orders room service. 8:57 p.m., Front desk sends second TV message to room 2805 requesting payment. 9:05 p.m., the second TV message requesting payment is acknowledged via remote. Saturday, June 3rd, 7:30 p.m., Evie, the reception manager, sends a staff member to check if the DND, or Do Not Disturb sign, is still on the door of room 2805. 7:36 p.m., the front desk sends a third TV message to room 2805 requesting payment, which is acknowledged shortly after via remote. So we have the third TV message sent at 7:36 p.m. and it was acknowledged, which means that either she was alive at that time or somebody else was in her room and acknowledged it for her. 7:50 p.m., security guard Espen Ness knocks on the door to room 2805 and hears the gunshot. 8:04 p.m., head of security finds Jennifer's body in her room and calls police. Police arrive on scene approximately 1 hour later. So now we're going to talk about evidence supporting suicide and evidence supporting homicide. First, we're going to start with suicide. Suicide was a very likely scenario at the time, with only 11 combined homicides in Norway by firearm in 1995, and a total of only 42 homicides in total in Norway. Suicides accounted for many more deaths at the time, 548 total, and 137 of them being female. Another thing is, for those 20 to 24 hours between Thursday and Friday, it is estimated that she was walking the streets contemplating ending her life. This is a pretty likely scenario. If you knew you were going to commit suicide, you would probably go and just try to get some air and visit the city one more time and really just sort of think to yourself on your own terms. Why sleep? So she obviously purchased bullets. The amount that were loose in her briefcase was not an odd amount, as you can't buy a single bullet. So she would have had to have bought them in a case. It is estimated that the reason a lot of her clothes were not found in the room is that she might have actually spent those 20 to 24 hours scattering some of her clothes amongst the city. Knowing that she wouldn't need them anymore, she thought she would just get rid of them. Perhaps she gave them to some homeless people or threw them out. Who knows what she did with them. There is still speculation that she was actually with a man. If she wasn't there with a man and was just there to end her life, saying she was there with a man could be a way to deflect attention on a single woman staying alone at such a fancy hotel, which is kind of the thinking in 1995, not necessarily my thinking. Now, this could be a bit of a stretch, but there's some mystery surrounding the last name Fergate. If you pronounce Fergate with a German accent, it sounds like forget in English. In Flemish, the word vergeet, and in German, the word vergessen, mean to be forgotten. So is there some connection there? Is there sort of a method to why she chose the name Fergate? Also, her last meal could be a sign of suicide. She ordered bratwurst. It is assumed she might have actually been German, so was this a homage to her nationality and a final taste of home? And the phone calls to Belgium. Could she have been trying to contact someone to tie up any loose ends before she died? Or hear a friendly voice of a loved one? The suicide theory is supported by the fact that maybe she just chose to end her life in a fancy hotel. You know, she has a last shower, she puts on some of her favorite clothing items, and fires one test shot into a pillow because maybe she has never used a gun before. Although there was no backspatter or scorching on her hands from the gunfire, this is not totally unheard of. Bernard Karger from the Institute of Legal Medicine at the University of Munster stated, quote, "Theoretically, you find both blood and gunshot residue, but in practice, you don't always." And the fact that she was holding the gun with her thumb on the trigger resulted in most of her hand actually facing away from the gun. So it's not crazy that some of the gunshot residue and blood spatter might have actually missed her hand. Some theories suggest the hotel was in on everything, given that no one checked her ID and let her stay as long as she did without paying, but this is more likely to be an error on the staff's end than a conspiracy to allow this woman to die undetected. Now let's talk a little bit about supporting the homicide theory. The gun that Jennifer was holding was a Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol. It has a very powerful recoil after being fired, and it is not physically possible to keep your hand stationary after firing it. Yet it fell in perfect place onto her chest, still within her hand, and her hand still in a sturdy gripping position with her thumb still on the trigger. How did it not fall from her hand or be flown across the room after being used? It kind of looked like it was placed there by someone else to make police believe exactly what they were leaning more toward, a simple suicide. Now, also to support the idea of homicide is the fact that there lacked blood spatter or gun residue on her hands. The muzzle of the gun was covered in blood, as well as the rest of the room. There was blood on the walls, the bed, the ceiling, the end tables, and the hotel phone. But there wasn't a droplet of blood on her hand that fired the gun. Although this was reported to not be an impossible scenario by forensic inspectors, this seems extremely coincidental. And what about the pillow with the gunshot through it? Could this have been used as a warning shot or a first test as a silencer? What made Jennifer sit still on the bed and allow herself to be shot, if it was by someone else? During the autopsy, Jennifer was tested for alcohol in her system, but was not tested for drugs. No alcohol was found, but could she have been drugged in any way or given a sedative? Also, given that her meal was only partially finished, it seemed plausible that Jennifer may have been interrupted when eating. The missing tags on Jennifer's clothes also aroused suspicion. All of the tags on her clothes were missing except for 3 German brand names. Again, the Travelite bag, the Brombuffel briefcase, and the René Lazard jacket. It was determined that removing these tags would destroy the items, but if you were going to commit suicide, why would that matter to you after your death? Why remove the tags on all the other items, but make sure that these stayed intact? These tags are also what led investigators to suspect that she was most likely German or had resided in Germany for a large part of her life. So if she was trying to remain anonymous, why would she leave them? Regarding the unaccounted for 20 to 24 hours that she was away from the hotel between Thursday and Friday, and the idea that if committing suicide, she may have used this time to discard her belongings, why keep only certain trivial items? Why keep 4 bras, a sweater, a jacket, but no underwear? Again, if you were going to commit suicide, why would you keep any of these items over any others? Also, extending her stay at the hotel is an odd thing to do if you're planning on ending your life. It almost seemed like she had plans that needed changing by doing this. With the missing 20 to 24 hours, the time spent waiting in the hotel lobby by the elevators, and the addition of the name Lewis on the registration card, it really seemed that she was being influenced by someone else's schedule or timetable. If you were going to commit suicide, would you shower, put on makeup, make sure you were nicely groomed, and then also get fully dressed, including putting on heels? If you were truly depressed enough to end your own life, would these superficial aspects mean anything to you? It seems more probable that she was waiting for someone to join her. Given that the second duvet cover had appeared to have been used the Friday night, could whoever have used it be expected to return for a second evening? And then, of course, there is the unaccounted for 14 to 15 minutes that the room was unsupervised directly after the security guard heard the gunshot fire. Someone could have gotten away during this time, and considering that no security footage was checked, this isn't that outlandish. One thing that is also debated is that it is unclear whether the security guard heard the first or second gunshot. Although it is assumed he heard the second, there is no proof of this. Jennifer may have already been dead when the second shot into the pillow was done to look like a novice attempt at testing a gun. Then the gun was placed in Jennifer's hand. One thing that I will note is that when the senior security guard entered the room, he said there was an acrid smell in the air. Acrid is not the smell of decomposition, but more of a sharp smell. Examples are tobacco, sour milk, and smoke. Like the smoke from a recently fired weapon. And in contrast to the statistics stated about low homicide probability during the suicide discussion, there is also data to disprove suicide. According to the Norwegian cause of death register for Norway during the years from 1969 to 2012, female suicides by firearm only account for 2.7% of total deaths, with poisoning taking the lead at 40.4%, hanging coming in second at 26.3%, and very least is cutting at 2.3%. This means that the odds of Jennifer having committed suicide by firearm are already incredibly low. If you are going to spend your last hours at a 5-star hotel, why take such a violent way out? Why not take an overdose of pills and lay to rest on the nice bedding and luxury mattress, falling asleep peacefully and bloodless? Now on to the theories about this case. First is call girl. Police suspect this due to the items of clothing left behind, the sexy black bras and the black wardrobe, the designer clothes. The lack of underwear could have been intentional. Perhaps she didn't see the need for them or thought it was more alluring to never wear them. This could also lead to the theory of homicide. Perhaps the killer discarded the underwear not to leave any traces of their DNA. Her booking alterations and last-minute schedule changes could mean that she was working around someone else's timeline. The fact that the hotel itself, being a 5-star hotel, would attract more high-end customers and be a desirable setting for sexual trysts. Given the great lengths she went to keep her identity and stay a secret, she could have been in the company of people who wanted their actions to be discreet as possible. Also adding to the fact that no one stepped up to claim they knew Jennifer after the news was released. Perhaps no one wanted anyone to know they were with her and for what reason. The 20 to 24 hours unaccounted for could have been spent at someone else's location, and the hotel was just a treat for her. Also, if she was the owner of the gun, she could have used it for her own protection. Removing her tags on the clothes could also be a way for her to keep her own privacy and keep the mystery alive with her clients for an added level of excitement. Given the clothes she wore and the brands that she bought, and to the level to which she kept herself groomed, it was evident that her appearance was very important to her. The idea of her being a spy. The Plaza Hotel was indeed an important hub for famous people, VIPs, and politicians. It was the hotel that hosted the 1992 international peace talks between Palestine and Israel, leading to the Oslo Agreement. So security and intelligence would not be overlooked. There is no argument that Jennifer didn't look the part. Like some Bond girl sent to intercept bomb codes, she dressed all in black and white and made a point to look quite mature for her age. She also had an ambiguous appearance to her, perhaps to be less detectable. She wore her hair short, wore dark colors, and had a men's wristwatch, and kept things simple. Any intelligence agency she would have been employed with would have paid for her stay ahead of time to avoid unnecessary questions and complications. Her age was a big factor as well. Although she listed herself as 21, already very young, she was proven to be closer to 24 to 25 years old. This is still extremely young to be at such a high level in an intelligence agency, also implying that she would have been employed years earlier and trained to this point to have the know-how to take on a case such as this. So I just want to take a short detour to actually tell you how they discovered her age through dental records, because it's super cool. During the Cold War, so 1955 to 1963, above-ground nuclear tests were being performed, and this created a higher C14 concentration level in the atmosphere, and tooth enamel will incorporate C14 that was present in the atmosphere during that time. So they can compare the levels in the teeth to the levels in specific geographic locations at the time to determine the age of an individual. They exhumed Jennifer's body in, I believe, 2017, and to test her teeth and get a DNA profile of her, and it turns out she was most likely born in 1971, or age 24 at the time. Now back to the spy theory. So her age was a big deterrent to this being a likely scenario, but not impossible. If she had been murdered by a kind of assassin or rivalry, then would they not have been in possession of their own gun and silencer? Surely they would not rely on using hers and hope that they can find an opportunity to take it from her unharmed. Also, if she was part of a spy organization, the country of origin would have claimed her body to bring home and tried to prevent any news on the murder getting into the media, but neither of those things happened. The affair. It was already suspected that Jennifer was working around someone else's schedule, perhaps even last minute, with all the changes and waiting around. She could have been having an affair with an older gentleman, given the sexy lingerie she packed, and the fact that she also seemed to not wear underwear. Again, this could also explain her need for secrecy surrounding her identity. Could this man have also been traveling to Oslo at the time and the two decided to get together for a weekend encounter? If the man had been staying on the same floor as Jennifer, he could have been the owner of the USA Today magazine from room 2816. This could also explain the men's cologne. The men's watch she wore may have been his. The time unaccounted for from Thursday to Friday may have been spent in his room, and the time spent waiting by the elevator may have been for this someone. If she had stayed in his room, this could also explain her missing clothing items at the time of her death. Maybe she left them in his room. Also, keep in mind that because keycards only track one way, Jennifer could have let the man into her room several times throughout this day without being monitored. Could Jennifer have been at the point where she wanted the man to leave his wife and be with her, and she brought the gun to frighten or persuade him into leaving? Did he turn her down and out of depression and anger she decided to kill herself? Or did they quarrel and she threatened to tell his wife and he killed her? The attempted phone calls to Belgium could have been Jennifer trying to call this man's wife and tell her about the affair. If there was another man, he might have been able to discard some of Jennifer's items from his room upon his departure, and this could explain why they were never found. Drugs and illegal activity. If Jennifer was part of some illegal drug trade, this could explain why she brought this suitcase, but it was not discovered with her belongings upon her death. This could also be one reason why she had stated on the registration card that she had planned to pay in cash, as she would have been expecting a large payout after the deal had been made. Was there a change of plans and whoever she was meeting decided they wanted to keep the drugs and the cash? So they took Jennifer out of the equation? No cash was found on her person during the investigation. This is another reason why no one would have claimed to have known her or spent time with her at the hotel, so they do not incriminate themselves. Isdalen copycat. There was a mysterious death in 1970 in Bergen, Norway, of an unidentified woman found in Ice Valley, or Isdalen in Norwegian. This woman's death was through carbon monoxide poisoning and sleeping pill overdose. However, her body was also burned beyond identification. Soot in her lungs proved, however, that she was still alive at the time of her burning, but there was no fire pit found near the body. There are similarities to this murder and Jennifer's. The Isdalen woman had also removed all the tags from her clothes, both the ones she wore and the ones found in her suitcase later at the train station. There was a variety of currencies found in this woman's suitcase, along with what appeared to be items of disguise, such as wigs, maps, coded notebooks. She also stayed at a local hotel, undetected and anonymous, mostly keeping to herself during her stay. She had many different and fake passports and identities. She stated she was from Belgium and spoke German, Flemish, French, and some English. Despite some differences and the fact that this Isdalen woman was most likely murdered, there are similarities. A theory in many chat rooms and amongst internet sleuths is that Jennifer is actually a missing woman from 1987 named Camilla Steina. And admittingly, the two women look very much alike. Camilla was reported missing by her sister in 1987, despite that no one had heard from her since the year earlier. Camilla was 5'8" and Jennifer was 5'2", which is a pretty big difference. Camilla was born in Denmark, whereas Jennifer was suspected to be from Germany. Also, at the time of her disappearance in 1987, Camilla was age 23, which would make Jennifer only about 16 or 17 at the time. Remember, the autopsy and dental isotope testing put Jennifer at about 24 to 25 years old in 1995. Both women did have dental work done, but their records did not match. In 1983, Camilla was reported to be moving towards a greener vegan lifestyle and living back to nature. She apparently wore canvas sheets and used hay to make duvets, even cooking her food over an open fire. As these were some of the last known descriptions of Camilla, they do not, in my opinion, seem to match the lifestyle that we know Jennifer lived in those last 3 days, staying in a 5-star hotel, wearing brand name clothes and lacy black bras, and making sure her appearance was clean and well groomed. So those are all of the theories as to what happened to Jennifer. Jennifer's body was given a funeral on June 26, 1996 in Oslo's Vestre Gravlund Cemetery, as with no new leads, the case went cold. There were no loved ones at Jennifer's funeral and no family to mourn her. Sadly, only pallbearers, groundskeepers, one police officer, and the photographer for Verdun's gang were there to pay respects and say goodbye to this mysterious woman. There was no eulogy and no kind words of reflection from those who knew her best. Her grave was unmarked and sat beside a cherry tree. There was no tombstone or marker, just another patch of dirt in the ground. Hopefully, Jennifer may find peace once and for all. As far as what theory I think is most probable, honestly, I'm still at a loss for this case. I don't really know. I lean towards more of her being a call girl or having an affair, and potentially either one of those scenarios that went wrong for Jennifer. I do kind of lean towards more of the homicide scenario, but there's just too many weird things that happened in the timeline for me to think that Jennifer was there to commit suicide. Especially, and this is just a small little thing, but why put on high heels? I can sort of see putting on nice clothes, but why heels? That doesn't make any sense to me. This case really stuck with me. I have no idea what happened to Jennifer, and I don't think we'll ever truly know. I think that's one of the alluring things about this case, is that there are so many unanswered questions, and we have a good record of how she lived her final days, but they kind of just create more questions than answers. As always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Jacqueline, and if you enjoyed this video, and I hope you did, then give it a thumbs up, help a girl out starting a new channel, subscribe, put your comments down below, and I'm really curious to see what people thought about this case and what their opinions are. What theory resonates with you? Do you think it was homicide? Do you think it was suicide? I'm super curious to know what you guys think. Thank you again. Have a lovely night, and we'll see you in the next video.